Today we have the privilege and honor of visiting with a ex-prisoner of war, Dan Jones. His home is in Tioga, North Dakota. That's a town located between Minot and Williston. One time was, I guess still is, the oil capital of North Dakota. That's where the first oil well was, commercial oil well was drilled, wasn't it, at Tioga?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. And then Dan here, he's been active in the prisoner of war organization, both not only on the state level, but he's been at Andersonville, and which is a national memorial to the prisoners of war of all past wars. But Dan is going to tell us now how he won the war. But first, Dan, we want to find out where you were born and when, and a little bit about your family and things like that, where you went to school and so on. So you just go ahead and tell me all those great secrets.
I was born in St. Lawrence, South Dakota, which is a real small town near Huron. Probably the best way to put it. And my dad was a farmer, and there was 13 children, and I was the last of the 13. We were quite a big family. Most of my older brothers were gone before I was even born, so and then the Depression came on, and so my father lost all his farmland and everything, and so we moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and he started selling insurance, and so I went to high school in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and won a scholarship for football, and so I played for Washington State College for for one season, and then
Washington State. Now that was in
Idaho. I was in the state of Idaho, and Washington State was in Pullman, Washington.
Yeah, across the border.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And so then most of my friends were getting drafted. My number was going to come up sooner or later, so I volunteered to go early, and so then we went to in California, Camp Roberts, California.
Was that a basic training camp?
That was a basic training camp, yes.
Army?
Army, yes.
Well, it could be anyone, of course.
Yeah. And then, so this one friend of mine, he wanted to go into the paratroops after we got through basic training, and I wasn't too thrilled about it, so he talked me into it, and I passed and he flunked, and so I went to down to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I really didn't care about jumping, but I seen the guys that got washed out had to go into the glider troop, so I figured I better jump.
Now that Fort Benning, was that an airfield right in connection with the fort? I was stationed at Fort Benning, that's why.
They had C-47s there, and I think they connected to the 8th Air Force. I could be mistaken on this. I don't know.
Yeah.
And
so, I think in wartime the gliders and weren't you with the 10th Air Force, or maybe we were wrong?
Well, at this time they were in the training. It was like 442nd
training. But anyway, you took your training there at Camp
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Fort Benning, Georgia. Yeah. Now, how did you can you tell us a little bit about that training for paratroopers?
We had to. The first week we ran about 10 miles every day and calisthenics and everything. Second week we started on small towers, and we'd jump out of small towers and glide to the ground. Then the third week we went into the big towers, which were 200 feet high, and they'd pull us up and then drop us. And
did you have a belt on you then, or?
Well, we was in the parachute, already in the parachute, and it was open.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And, so then they would release us, and we'd practice that. That was about 200 foot high. Then the fourth week we had to make 5 jumps, and the last one was a night jump.
From an airplane or from a tower?
From an airplane.
For the C-46 or 47?
C-47s.
C-47.
And we had to pack our own chutes, and that was the nervous part.
I see.
Because we didn't know if we'd packed them right. And
were they chest packs?
Yes.
Or backpacks?
The backpacks, and we had a chest pack emergency, too.
Oh, I see.
So we had 2 packs. And we was hooked up to a static line, a line where we put a hook on it, and we went out the door. And they jumped, I think,
But that means when you went out the door, then the parachute opened.
Right. It automatically opened.
Yeah.
And if it didn't open, then you had to use your emergency.
Yeah. How high were you on those flights?
We started out about 1,200 feet, and we got down to 400 or somewhere in that in our last jumps. Then our last jump was a night jump, and then we earned our wings and our boots. And
you got paratrooper's badge then?
Right, yeah.
What about, a lot of guys break their legs there, or arms?
Well, we had a lot of them and we even had some killed. They tangled in the air, but it wasn't that, maybe 2 out of 5,000 or something, that it wasn't. And a lot of guys were hurt on account of the wind and lit on roads or something. They'd break their legs that way, but I was fortunate I never had a bad jump in that part of it. But
then you were a regular paratrooper.
Yeah, then we were, and we were still not assigned to anything. We were just replacements. And then we went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to maneuvers as a group of replacements. But we actually weren't assigned a unit yet. So then in about November, December, my father died, and I got an emergency furlough and went home and come back, and they put us all ready to replace in the 101st Airborne. But
now, was that 101st Airborne? Was that at Fort Bragg then?
No, 101st Airborne was in England.
Oh, already in England?
Yeah, they were already there.
Oh, you went over there then?
Yeah. They hadn't, they were just making up the unit. They weren't a real division yet.
No.
They were using the cadre from the 82nd Division, and when we come over, we got chased into Ireland, and so then we spent time in Northern Ireland, and there's where I lost my rank. One night I went into town, and we used to stay for 2 or 3 days, us guys, and we come back, and our troops had went to England, so they gave me 7 days of hard labor, which wasn't much except working in a garden, so it wasn't really that.
Yeah.
But I lost my rank on the thing, and which sometimes I'm glad I did, because the officers, non-commissioned officers, had the worst time of things, and so then we went over to England and replaced with a fill-in there to make the division. That's where the division is formed. And then in our company, there was 200 men, company G502, and so then they finally made a unit, and then we were attached to the 101st Airborne. Then we made, I think, 4 or 5 jumps in England before getting ready to go for D-Day,
You say that you made practice jumps now?
In England, yes.
In England, yeah.
Yeah. So we made 5. I had 13 jumps altogether, so I must have had 6 in England, and because my 13th jump was in combat, and 14th was in combat. So.
Well, now then you were on D-Day was the 6th of June, 1944.
Right. But they call it D-Day, was June 6th, but we actually jumped June 5th at 12 o'clock at night. We spent 2 hours up in the air to get 3 divisions in the air at one time. I mean, our company led the 101st Airborne.
Now, was this in the daytime or night?
We jumped at night, at 11 o'clock at night in France. But we was up in England a couple hours before we took off. And that's where this picture of Eisenhower comes in, this right here. He reviewed us that day, the day just before the night we jumped in, and that's me talking to Eisenhower. But this is not the famous picture. There's a picture that's in all the magazines famous with the lieutenant talking to him. But he came down the line talking to all of us, and I remember what he said. He just asked me where I was from, and I said Idaho, and that was about the conversation. And he shook my hand, but as we left that night, he got on the opposite side where the doors were open in the planes, and he weighed every plane off the ground as we took off the night, because we were lead planes. We were for the whole invasion.
For the whole invasion.
I was within the first 100 paratroopers that jumped in France.
Yeah. Now this is for the big invasion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, for D-Day.
For D-Day. Yeah.
Right. And the jump there was probably the most bottled up jump in the world.
Well, what kind of plane were you in then?
C-47.
You weren't in the glider now. You
No.
were in the plane.
They had other troops like the 327th, and they pulled gliders. Some of the planes did, the C-47s, and the others were strictly all paratroopers.
But the paratroopers were in the airplanes, not in the gliders.
No, we weren't in the gliders, no.
Yeah.
Where
did you jump? Do you remember where you jumped, approximately?
Definitely. St. Mary of Glees is where the town I jumped. And 2 or 3 hours later, they had the biggest battle of the thing there, because I was in and out of there before the 82nd lit right in that town. And that's, if you've seen the pictures where the guys hung up on the tower, on the church and everything.
Church steeple, right.
Yeah, well, that's this. I know this guy real well. That Shepherd was his name, and I knew the guy that was hung up on that tower, and I've met him 3 or 4 times since. But this is where I lit, and I was supposed to be 2 miles from the beaches, and I lit 8 miles from the beaches. So
What about your other troops now with you? Were they pretty close to you, or did they land all over? Or?
Yeah, it was scattered at least a 20 or 30 mile area, and.
What happened when you got on the ground then?
Well, when I got on the ground, they were shooting at me on the way down.
Germans.
The Germans, and
There's night now.
Yeah, right. And I lit amongst a bunch of cattle that saved my life. They were running around, and they threw my chutes as they were shooting at me. And the guy that jumped right behind me, he got killed on the way down. But the fact is, when I jumped, I had my rifle inside my chute, and the thing came loose, and I lost my rifle on the way down. And so I ended up taking this guy's rifle behind me that was dead, and
he was shot. He was killed right as he was coming down.
What,
did they have a searchlight center, or they?
Well, they were right underneath us. I mean,
I see. They could see,
and tracer bullets and everything was going up and everything. So,
were you hit?
No, I wasn't hit then at all.
And you hit the ground then?
Right.
What happened then when you hit the ground?
Well, then 2 of us, I went, and after I picked up this guy's rifle, then I went over to a ditch there, and in those days we had the little squawkers, that like crickets.
Oh, yeah.
Those little crickets that we could identify each other with. Well, there was so many of them that all over that you didn't know where, and actually the crickets of the country were in on it too. They joined in. So it kind of made a disaster but anyhow, the 2 of us came together, and then we started out on our own. We couldn't find anybody else, and we went up to a farmhouse, and
it was light now.
No, this is still at midnight.
Oh, it's still dark. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and we went up to this farmhouse, and we decided to throw a hand grenade inside the window, and we scared the French people who lived there, and they come running out, and they looked at us. We had chocolate all over our faces, and because for the cut the shadow.
Camouflage.
We put chocolate on our faces, and these people, I thought they were going to die. They come to the door, and they saw us, and they didn't know what we were, or the invasion was on, or anything. And so we finally had to try to calm them down. Then they finally calmed them down, and we went in the house, but our hand grenade had really tickled their front room. It blew all stuff all over everywhere, but we really didn't know what we were supposed to do. But anyhow, so these French people, we calmed it down enough to find, we had little maps with us and to see where we was at, and we found out then how far we were away. And the closest town was the St. Mary of Glees, which was 2 miles away. And so we walked through that, and then later, right after,
walked there during the night then?
Yeah, and then so later on we joined up with about 7 other troops we found, and they were the 82nd, 101st were all mingled, but we found some guys from our unit, and so we went down the road, and a machine gun nest was stopping us from going any further, so we had a bazooka with us, and the lieutenant told 2 of us to go up and knock out this machine gun nest. And so me and this other guy crawled up there, and I loaded, and he pulled the thing about. Truthfully, I don't know if we knocked him out or what we did, But anyhow, I got the Silver Star for it. That's this one right here, and for knocking out a machine gun nest.
I see.
And so then we come back, everybody was gone. They'd already taken off somewhere, and so then we was back with just the two of us again. So then that when we went around a corner, here come a German soldier, and the only thing that saved my life, he had a bolt action, and I had an M1, and we were no more than 7 feet apart when we saw each other, and he went to pull the bolt back, and I just shot him straight on because, and I didn't know, I'd never seen a German before, and it's always been one of the bad problems I've had of remembering things that I didn't want to remember. And
now this is still on the first day.
The first 2 hours.
First 2 hours.
Yeah, right.
Was there a lot of noise around there?
There was shooting all over, and bombs. The Air Corps was dropping bombs on the beaches at that time.
Yeah.
And see, we were supposed to have been, as soon as they dropped the bombs on the beaches, we were supposed to go in and knock out the big guns.
Those big
shore
guns, shore artillery.
Yeah, right.
Now, what about these gliders now? Did you have any of those with you, or were they there?
They're kind of a unit of its own.
Yeah, I see.
I mean, and so we probably fought with them because everybody was mingled up.
Yeah.
I mean, 82nd Airborne, 101st, and gliders, and everybody was. And the gliders had the worst time because they'd put up a lot of poles and everything, and those gliders hit them. And one glider general was killed, or General Pratt, that come in there.
Pershing Carlson, from Bismarck Mandan area, he was piloted one of those.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
Gliders.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's an awful thing.
And to me, they were like setting ducks all the time.
I don't think they have any. I think they've done away with those gliders.
I think so. They should have. Because they're in the same way in Holland. I'm getting ahead of things.
Yeah.
But they were a disaster in a way. I mean, they got big equipment to the ground, but that's about all we can say they did.
Well, what happened now is that on that first day, you say all this fighting and so on. How in the world did you get back to England, or what happened?
Well, no, the first, then we fought after about 2 or 3 days, we got back to our own unit. And at this time, the town of Carrington was the place to cut off all the Germans in the Cherbourg Peninsula. So our company again led the thing, and we took 1 day to go over 4 bridges.
You were on the ground now.
Yeah, right. This is about the 5th day.
Yeah.
And we fought in small groups up until that time, then we started fighting as a unit. And then our colonel got the Congressional Medal of Honor at this. We had the first bayonet charge of World War II, and that's where I got hit.
Now, bayonet charge, could you explain that a little more?
Well, the colonel says fixed bayonets, and we was all along the road, the ditches there, and we had to cross a field, maybe like a football field, and there was a farmhouse there, and the Germans were on hedgerows on both sides. And so we charged right into the Germans, and in that area, I would say there was 200 Americans wounded or dead. And I got to this farmhouse, and I heard a shell coming, so I ducked under a tree, and I got a tree burst from this 88 shell, what it's called. And it got into my back and into my lungs, and the concussion knocked me completely out. And so I was there maybe for, I don't know, maybe a couple hours that way, I don't know. Then I got up and some German shot me in the knee, and so I was hit twice in the same area. And then by that time there were so many German dead and our dead, they called a truce for an hour to pick up the wounded and the dead and take them back. But I couldn't join them because I was crippled up, and I couldn't release my rifle because my arm was paralyzed, and so I started out by myself across these 4 bridges, and the last bridge, I must have went in the water, and I woke up in England. Somebody pulled me out of the water, and I had a lieutenant's helmet on, and whoever it was, I never will know who. But I would have drowned if whoever had to take me out.
You fell into this water or trying to cross it? And
Yeah. See, they'd blown these little bridges, and we had to go across these canals. They were about 25 foot wide or something. And so I made over 3 of them all right, but the 4th one, I don't know, I guess I couldn't make it, and somebody dug me out.
And then what happened? You picked you up and they flew you back to England?
No, we went by boat to England. I woke up once on the ship, just for a few minutes, and then when I got to England, I come to, I don't know, 2 days or what, I have no idea. And they had me in a room all by myself, and all my clothes, my dog tags were gone and everything. So this nurse asked me something, what my name, Lieutenant, and I said, well, I ain't no lieutenant, I'm a private. So boy, they put me out in the with all the rest of them in a hurry. So then I stayed in the hospital for about a month. And then finally
How was your stay in the hospital? Was it satisfactory?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there was so many
of course,
wounded.
You were sick, so yeah.
Yeah, and so
a lot of guys were worse off than you were.
Oh yeah, a lot of them are worse. Fact is, I was in probably one of the better conditions. I mean, because everything, they'd taken all the shrapnel out of my back, and other than the one that's in my lungs, I still got 2 pieces in my lungs. And my leg, they worked at the leg had just went through the meat, so I wasn't hurt that bad, and. So then when I got out of the hospital, we went back to our regular camp, and then they had replacements. And then they made the unit back up to the 200 men. But out of that, we've probably lost 60 guys or so.
On that first day, that first operation,
yeah.
Well, how many operations? Now then you went to another operation.
And then we went to Holland. Our second jump was in Holland. That was a day jump. And if you've ever seen the movie or read the book, A Bridge Too Far, well, that's what it's all about. The bridges were too far.
Was that on a Sunday morning? I just wondered.
Yeah, I think it was.
Well, because at the base I was at, I saw those C-47s. They just had thousands of them up there.
Yeah, we had 3 divisions again. The British, the British jumped at Arnhem, and that's in this book, A Bridge Too Far, most was about. And the 82nd jumped at Nijmegen, and we jumped at Best, Holland, so we were the closest to the British. The British, Montgomery's outfit, had come up to the Wilhelmina Canal, and the Wilhelmina Canal was the point for us to jump. And the Germans were on one side of the canal, and the British were on the other. And as soon as we jumped, we were supposed to take these bridges. Well, the Germans blew them, and then we was in between the German front lines and their secondary. So we were right in the. And out of that, I think there's, to this day, there's 17 of my 200 still living, and they were all either wounded or prisoners of war,
Of the 200 that are in the operation?
Right.
Yeah. What, then, were you captured at that time?
Well, we fought for about 2 days in the woods.
Fighting Germans?
Right.
In the
and
woods.
We were just across the road from each other all the time we was fighting.
Yeah.
And we was a bunch of trees there, and so our lieutenant sent a corporal up there to tell us to get out and get back out of there, because we didn't know it, but the whole 85th German division was just right on the other side of the road. And we thought it was just fighting a small amount, but we actually, us two, and before it was over with, they had to bring the whole 101st Airborne Division up to fight what we were, the 200 of us, were doing to start with, because the Germans are advancing too far into us. Well, anyhow, so when he told me to get out, they come to my hole, and a shell, 88 shell, lit, and he took his leg off, and so I put a tourniquet on it and then went back into the woods trying to find a medic. And I found a medic. He was working on somebody else, and I told him about where I was, and on the way back, the Germans, it's kind of hard to explain, but the Germans were within 30 or 40 feet all over around us. I mean, we were fighting long distance. We were fighting short.
And they were firing rifles.
Yeah, and so they fired at me, and so I jumped in a hole with this Howard from Rhode Island, and he was just like you and I sitting in a foxhole, only closer, and we had our rifles sitting down, and there was a path right next to his hole. And so he asked me what time it was, and I raised my arm and said 2, and then it was 2:30, and when I raised my arm, here were 7 Germans standing right on top of us, because it was in a wooded area. We couldn't see them, they couldn't see us.
Is it nighttime or daytime?
This is right in 2:30 in the afternoon.
Oh, yeah, I see.
My time could be off by my clock for what the time was there.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I really, it probably was 7 o'clock at night there. And so, anyhow, they took us up out of the hole and took everything off us, except then they gathered around us to taking stuff off, and one of our machine gunners, which was only 30 feet away, saw it, and he opened up and killed all of them except the one, or killed or wounded them, because I could hear them all crying and everything. And my pants and everything were just full of bullet holes, but I didn't have a scratch. And so I played possum, and me and this German sergeant were just face to face. And I looked up under my helmet after I played possum, and I looked him right in the eye. He put a gun to my head, and so he told me to get up. And then this Howard, the other guy, was laying there too, and so they were gonna. He put his pistol to his head, and I told Howard to get up, and he wasn't hit either. So actually, the Germans gathering around us, so it saved our life. But I still had a knife in my jump jacket, and I had a hand grenade still in my pocket. And this is probably one of the biggest decisions I ever had to make. Then both sides start shooting at us, the Americans from this side and the Germans from this side. And we was crawling down this path.
You were in a hole kind of where?
No, we was in a path then, just flat on the ground.
Yeah.
And everybody was shooting at us. And so Howard went first, and then the German, and then I was last.
Was this German, was he sort of a guard then for you, or had captured you?
He's the one that captured us, yes.
Yeah.
He was a sergeant.
Yeah.
And later I'll tell you a little bit about this, but that was my decision to pull a knife and knife him, or throw the hand grenade at him, or then try to run back through our own troops. And I think I made the decision it would be I'd get killed more by running toward our own guys than I would staying with them, you know. So the 3 of us crawled for maybe 200 yards, and everybody's still shooting at us, you know. And so finally, we went kind of around the corner, and here was the whole German army right there. And they were really mad because our airplanes had come over and strafed them, and they'd killed, I don't know, hundreds of them along the roads. And so they tried to shoot us more than once. I mean, guys come put a pistol to our head, and this sergeant would pat him down and give him a heck or something. And I always figured that he wanted to get away from the front lines too. So he took us back for the town of Olympia, is the name of the town.
You were prisoners then. He took you back then.
Right. He took us back, and this.
You didn't have any weapons at all on you.
No. At that time, I still had this hand grenade, but I finally gave it to him. And this knife after I seen that we'd had it. You know? Yeah. And but in this story here, if you this is that girl that come out to the roads, and I met her. Another page here, I think. No, a little further yet, one more page, I think. Now this gal here, she came out the roads with bread and milk along that highway when we was prisoners with this German, and she talked to him, and
she's a French girl.
No, she's a Holland girl.
Oh, Holland, excuse me, yeah.
Okay, and then so she talked to them and to give us bread and milk, and she winked at us, and she played up to this German guard, and so he finally let us have bread and milk, and then further back here it shows what she looks like today. I met her 40-some years later.
This way or the other way?
This way, let's see. That's her right there, 40-some years later.
Oh, I see.
She looks a little different.
Yeah.
45 years later, I guess, when I met her. But
now, who's that with
that's
her?
me.
That's you with her. And that's that girl that was in.
That's that young girl. But when I went back to Holland the second time, I went to this town. We always went to the wrong town where I was taken prisoner, and so I could never understand. So we went through this road coming back from there, and I seen that house, and it was right next to the road, and I said, that's the place. So I went over there, but she didn't live there, but her sister-in-law did, on this farm, and so I got to meet her the next day or so, you know.
I see, yeah.
And so she really probably never saved her life, but she made life more better for us. You know?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's always something.
Yeah, yeah.
Then what happened?
Well, then they took us, there's a picture back here of, they took us into this town of Olympia, then they interrogated us, and they tried to further back yet. They're right here. They tried to tell us about who outfits we were and everything, and we just gave them our rank and stuff, and then they'd beat us up, and one guy took his knife and cut part of my finger off, and
Those are so-called interrogators.
right.
Yeah.
And they could speak English real fluently.
Were you in Holland yet? Or
Yeah, we're still in Holland.
Holland.
We're probably 20 miles from where I was captured.
I see.
A small town. By that time it was dark.
Now, were there many other Americans with you?
There were just two of us that were captured.
Two. Yeah.
But then when we got back to this town, we probably run into 400 or 500 that they'd brought in from other places.
Oh, I see.
captured.
Okay.
And then so they interrogated all of us, and then they beat me up and threw me down this basement. And there's the only time that I don't remember. For 4 or 5 days, or maybe 2 days, I was completely out of it. I didn't know. I mean, they beat me so bad that I was. I mean, I don't know. Kind of lost.
Just lost track of
consciousness,
time.
you
Yeah.
know. And then I woke up last. I was getting on a train for Germany, and we took a 5-day trip with one slice of bread and some water.
Well, those 40 and 8 cars were you in?
Well,
or?
no, they put us in their kind of compartments. So we was
see.
like
Oh, yeah.
40 men maybe inside one of these compartments.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
had room enough to stand up,
Yeah.
you know. And then we got down about 102 miles or farther, I don't know. And our Air Corps come over and strafed the trains, and there was probably 9,000 of us prisoners. And I don't blame the Air Corps for doing this, because they had guns on the back and everything else, you know.
Looked like a military train.
Right, and so they strafed us, and they probably killed at least 200 Americans. You know, we had 3 in our compartment was killed right above us. You know, and
By the Americans. Yeah.
yeah,
So-called
and
friendly
they
fire.
just took them off and threw them in the ditches. And that's a lot where this MIA thing comes in. I mean, here's just an example. There was probably 200 men. They'd already taken our dog tags, and we had no anything at all to say who we were, even, you know. And so when they threw these guys off, they had no identification whatsoever, and threw them off on the tracks and just left them there. So that's how MIAs, to my notion, come to be, you know, because like there's 200, and there's still 77,000 POWs in World War II that are unaccounted for,
Yeah.
you know.
Now, you're on this train, and where are you going now?
We're on our way to Limburg, Germany.
Where's that located?
It's right straight south of Hamburg, probably in from the Holland border, 500 miles and 500 miles north. We probably went to 700 or 800 miles in those 5 days, you know, and they kept us locked up completely.
Now, what kind of a camp was that when you got to Limburg?
When we got there, that was everybody. They had British, and they had Indians from India, and they had everybody. And it was just where everybody went first to get tagged. Like my number was 90,297.
Now, did they sent you through sort of an interrogation or like a reception center or something?
Well, yeah, and then they
took a picture of you and so on, or?
Well, they must have taken a picture, because I seen there a couple of other guys, prisoners, with me. Somehow they got their pictures back, and I never did. But
No.
But they took pictures and gave us a number. That's when we were identified who we were, and then we stayed there a couple of weeks, and then they took all the paratroopers. That we were the worst hated troops, because they all thought we were Chicago gangsters. You know, that we were really the elite troops of the United States at that time. You know. And
Then how long did you stay there at Limburg?
Probably 2 weeks, you know. And
What kind of food did you get there?
there we got 5 men to a loaf of bread for a day and some water, and that was it.
Yeah.
And
No soup or vegetables or nothing else?
No.
What about, where'd you sleep, or what are the sleeping conditions?
Well, if there's just maybe you can see that in that one picture there. That's what the inside, and there was 400 of us in an area like this in a great big barrack, just enough room to lay down, and that was all, you know. This is at the first camp, and that was the ridge compared to the others. You know, it's probably the best place we had.
You just lay down on the ground then?
Right.
Yeah. It was just over a barn-like affair.
Yeah, a big, long...
They have guards and things on?
Oh, yeah, they had, and then all the latrines were outside, and
just a slit trench or something
right,
like that?
And the water, you got a cup of water a day, and they come in and gave you your one slice of bread.
What about your clothes now? You had the same clothes on?
Well, we had the same clothes, and I wore those same clothes for 9 months. I never took them off.
No.
And I never took a bath, so I imagine we smelled pretty bad.
Now, and then you stayed there for how long did you stay?
About 2 weeks.
About 2 weeks. Then what happened?
Then they put us on a train again for 5 days, and when we was going through Berlin, they was bombing Berlin, and the same thing happened again. A lot of the guys were killed at the freight yards.
You were on a train now?
Yeah, and we couldn't get off.
Well, was that one of those trains that had compartments in it?
No, we still had, compartments. We still had the same type of trains.
Oh, yeah, same.
And there, the guards got outside when they was bombing, and they had machine guns on the trains, so in case anybody tried to run.
Yeah.
But a guy maybe could have ran there, but it wouldn't have done him any good. No. I don't know what good it would have done him.
Now, what kind of food and drink and so on?
Well, that was the same situation there. We had one slice of bread for each day. I mean, in other words, we had about 3 fingers of bread for 5 days. I mean, that's, and that, you probably know what this bread's like with
sure.
sawdust in it. And
but if you're hungry enough, it's good.
It was good. It was good.
Yeah. And then you had water.
And had water, and that was
How were the guards treating you now on the train?
They did a lot of beating and pushing you around, and you know, they wanted everything done in a hurry.
How did you have any sick guys on the train?
Oh, a lot of them.
In
fact, just when we got to New Brandenburg, the second one, over half of us had to carry the others up into the Stalag, because it was probably a mile from the train tracks, and those that could walk would help the others. And then also at that same time we went there, they were burying 4,000 or 5,000 people right along where we was walking, you know, that from that camp. Most of them were Russians. They were burying
them in ground?
Yeah, in the ground, yeah.
Just in a trench or something?
Yeah, a big trench, and then they just covered them up. And
where'd they come from? Did they come from the front?
Well, they were prisoners of war too.
Prisoners of war, yeah.
They were at the 2A.
But they died then, or?
Yeah, especially the Russians. You know, they probably died worse. They had British there, and they had us.
Yeah.
And Russians. And
well, they treated you better than the
Russians. Yes, yeah. I would say they did.
Yeah. British too were treated better than the Russians.
That's right. Yeah. But like in this first camp, we had an American that. I don't know, he got too arrogant, and he had a lot of guys beaten and everything, you know, and so, but he spent time in Leavenworth after the war.
He did.
They turned him in. And
yeah, I've never known anyone that did
that.
Did you? Yeah,
that happened.
Yeah. Now this was what's the name of this camp now you're at?
We're at 2A now.
2A.
And we were 12A is the first one.
Were you did they have barracks, open bay barracks like this, or were they rooms of 10, 20?
No, they were almost like this. They were just big long silos, like I don't know what you'd call them, but
guys just laid on the floor or whatever it was.
But they had some of the like barracks, but I never seen them at that time. We was in these, because now this is in probably the last of September, somewhere in that time, you know, and the weather was still pretty good.
Yeah.
Then they moved 45 of us up to. It's called Detmensdorf, the name of the town, Detmensdorf, but it was near Rostock, and it would probably be 20 miles north or so of Rostock, and then maybe 30, 40 miles inland.
You're getting pretty close to the Baltic, aren't you?
Yeah, we're right. Rostock is right on the Baltic.
Yeah, it's a port.
Right.
And how was that? What camp was that?
Well, this was called 311I, like what this book is named.
Yeah, 311.
Yeah, and
now and then did you have barracks there?
No, we lived above a pig barn. We had 45 of us above a barn that had pigs underneath.
I see.
And we had bars on our windows and one light and a straw thing for a mattress.
Yeah.
And 2 high beds. I mean, each about this wide on top of each other.
Yeah.
and then we had an outside toilet, and they
Was that the only building in that camp?
well, no, there was 13 other prisoners of war above a bakery, and I've heard after the war there was 3 different work command. That's what we're called, work commandos.
Yeah.
In this town, but we never got to meet none of them, other than we knew that these 13 were in that town too.
Now you were in this, what kind of, were you in the barracks then? So-called barracks or block?
This is above the barn, pig
This is
barn.
still above the barn.
That's where we finally ended up till the war ended, and working on the railroad.
You were working?
Yeah, they took us out, and we worked about 12 hours a day on the railroad.
Now, did you have guards with you?
Oh yes, we had about 4 or 5 guards.
And how big a group was that now that worked on the railroad?
There's 45 of us in this starting out.
Yeah.
And there's 33 of us come out alive, and the rest are died in prison camp or got sick and
now,
stuff.
how would you move from your barracks to where you went?
Okay, we go to the railroad station in the morning, and they would take us by that train to the bigger trains of the town of Saanich, is the name of the town, and there was the main line of the railroads, and where our Air Corps bombed the tracks and stuff. So as soon as they bombed them, we fixed them.
You fixed them up. How were you, pretty good workers?
Not really. They used to try to make us work, but they said we were the dumbest people they ever knew. And they would come and holler at you. And fact is, one day, they either had a shovel under the ties and stuff, and so I didn't like it. And then the other one you picked all the time, and so I didn't like this pick. So I went over and picked up a shovel and started shoveling this. The guy had 3 men from the railroad out there, to foreman, superintendent.
And run the show.
Then they had, so this super foreman, he was a real mean one. He was really out of it. But anyhow, he took a rifle off the shoulder of one of the guards and shot right between my hair. And boy, I tell you, I went to work and I never looked up. But
now, how did the other guards treat you there? What about the food? You eat any food?
Well, now we still have about the same rations, only we got a bowl of soup a day, and the soup was water with potatoes in. They took the potatoes out and gave to the pigs, and we had the broth off from the potatoes.
I see.
We got that once a day. We usually had that at night when we come in. Then we had our slice of bread a day. We could eat it whenever we wanted to in the morning breakfast.
Well, now it started getting cold, wasn't it?
Very cold, and so. Like in November then, we worked out there, and in November the 3 of us decided to escape. And
from this camp,
right?
Camp.
One was a French-speaking, he could speak French, and over there the French had been prisoners so long that they had their own little houses, like, the Germans. They didn't have no guards or nothing because they'd been there for 5 or 6 years, probably.
Part of the population.
Yeah, right. And so. How we escaped one night, we come in with this outside toilet, and the other guys mingled around, and so 3 of us went, we'd unload, we loosened some boards on the back of the toilet, and every time we was coming in, and so we went through the toilet part underneath and back up again, and that was kind of smelly a little bit too, and then we took the wood off the backside, and then the 3 of us took off and ran, and we made a place where we'd meet, down out in the woods there.
Was this night now?
Yeah, this is probably 12 o'clock at night.
How many guys were there all together in that camp?
There's 45 of us.
4 of us.
But like I say, that only 33 came out.
But there were 3 of you now that escaped temporarily, or at least started.
And so the other guys mingled around, and they've told us later on that at that night when the guards tried to get a count, they'd mingle around, and the guards never could get a count, so they gave up. So we had until the next morning until they finally got a good count on everybody, and then realized that 3 of us are gone. But another thing that happens there, if the German sergeant in charge, anybody escapes, then he has to go to jail for a month too. See?
I see.
He wasn't too happy about that, but I'll tell you more about that pretty soon. But anyhow, we traveled at night, and during the days we slept in haystacks. And this time there was snow on the ground. And
did you have any food?
Well, the other guys would give us food. We had maybe a loaf of bread between all the 3 of us, And so we found this French guy's place, and this guy that speaks French went there and talked to him, and he was going to go out and get us food, and we'd stole a rowboat, and we was going to Sweden. And funny part, while I was in Sweden just 3 days ago, I seen where we'd had to come out at, and we had never made it. There was about 50 kilometers of water in the middle of winter, and the Baltic Sea is just like an ocean, you know. And so it's a good thing that we got caught. But anyhow, this Frenchman went out to get us food and come back to the Gestapo.
Oh.
And so they marched us down the road that night with 2 sidecars and the 4 Germans, you know. And they stopped us in the middle of the road and gave us a cigarette, and we figured, well, that's it, you know. And pretty soon they told us to march on. So from then they took us back to the camp where we escaped from. And this sergeant, he was so mad because he had to go, so he went around the corner to see if we was going to try to escape, and we didn't leave. So he come and just beat the heck out of us again, you know. And so finally they took us up to back to this 2A, and they put us underground, and each one of us were in a different, you know, thing. We could hear each other, but that's about all, you know. And
now, is this the same camp or another camp?
no, this is 2A, back where we come from before we went to that work camp.
Oh, I see. Okay. They sent by train then, or a walk, or?
No, I think they took us in command cars or something, if I remember right.
All 3 of you?
Yeah. And so then they put us underground, and there we got 1 slice of bread for a week and 1 cup of water for a week.
You don't remember where that was?
Yeah. It's in the 2A, but below the barracks. It was just like if they dug a hole here and put you underneath. And part of, like a daylight basement probably, but it wasn't much daylight. You had about that much before the floor and stuff, see. So in other words, I think it was stone underneath what they dug out these basements, and they made petitions for each prisoner, like. And I don't know how many was in there, but I only know of us 3, you know. And
sort of solitary confinement.
Right, definitely. So. Yeah. We had a space of...
Did they interrogate you much there, or?
No, they just threw us in there, and that was the end of it as far as they were concerned. And so it got to be that our food ran out and stuff, so then we started eating rats, you know. Us guys had... I don't know, I probably have ate 2 or 3, I don't know. Ones I could catch, anyhow. They were a little faster than I was. But there was a lot of rats running around under there. And
what was above that?
Storage, I really don't know what there was above us. No. I mean, and the thing that hurt me most of all probably is it was so dark all the time that my eyesight went from 20/20 to now I can't see that. If I took my glasses off, I couldn't see nothing.
Oh, I see.
And same way with our teeth all rotted out. And I was 23 years old, and I had to get all false teeth and everything. So.
Yeah, you don't know how many, you were there for a month or 2 in that place?
I was in there just about a month because I know I spent my 19th birthday in there, and I was born December 15th. Yeah.
What about Christmas now in Germany?
Well, so then we got out, and the barracks the day of Christmas, where they had us working on the tracks, and we told them we'd lay 3 sections of rail a day, and plus the ties and everything. We told them, and that would be from lots of times it'd be till dark at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, and then they'd put us in underneath the railroad station. And we told them we'd lay 6 sections by 2 o'clock in the afternoon when the train wasn't going through, then just double what we've been doing. If they'd let us go in for Christmas, and they laughed at us, and so they stood back, and we made it easy. Then they tried to work us that way again, and we were done. But
you had time off then for Christmas?
Yeah, we had Christmas. Then we'd gathered up some guys had some, they weren't really trees, but twigs and stuff, and then we made a Christmas tree out of it. And everybody put their parachute wings and all this kind of thing on the tree for Christmas Day. And
did the guys wear their rank there? Or
there was no rank. Everybody was either private or corporal, or there was this guy from, he was a glider trooper from Florida, Marlowe's his name, and he was kind of our leader because he was 22 years old. And the rest of us were 19,
Now, how long were you there then, in that place?
We were there, well, altogether just about 9 months.
And where did you go leave then, that there place, that dungeon place? Or?
Well, as soon as my month was up, they sent me back to the same place.
Oh, I see.
And then I went back till the war ended. You know, and worked on the railroad tracks.
On the railroad track
Yeah.
again, yeah.
Yeah. And then our ranks went down so bad that we had a hard time, you know, doing rails and everything. We didn't have enough men to.
Were they light rails or heavy rails?
Well, it took 16 men we put on a rail to put it on, but we probably wouldn't need half that.
No.
You know.
Did they have pretty good equipment to work with outside?
No, it was just about as old as you could think of, you know.
They have ties?
Now the ties, there's another thing. There would be one concrete tie, then there would be a wooden tie, then we'd have to screw the concrete ties with the bolts in them, see. Well, we'd screw this way a while and screw this way a while till the final.
Then there would be a concrete tie and then a wooden tie.
Yeah.
Say, the width of those rails, was that
They were probably like ours, probably what, 8 foot apart, 6 foot apart?
6 foot or so? Yeah.
And they were about 20 foot long.
Yeah.
But I don't know what a rail is. That's maybe
Yeah.
6 foot wide or something.
The ties, though, they had plenty of ties there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Did you work on any bridges?
No, because most of ours was just places they bombed out. We worked the same 20 miles for 8 months or so. The Air Corps would come over. We got kind of ticked off at the Air Corps, ruined our railroad.
And then you have to go back. Was it American or British?
I think of both. I think
Both.
they both did the bombing.
Did
We
they
never seen them. We heard them, but you know, we never seen them at night. They'd come at nights.
Yeah. Well, British usually done most of their bombing at night.
Did they?
Yeah.
Well, must be
British did.
British, yeah.
Americans in the daytime.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And the British done a lot of that so-called wide bombing, where they
Bombed everything.
bombed over a large area and so on, a
Yeah.
large city. Now, how did the end come for you then?
Well, we.
Say you'd lost a lot of weight by now.
Well, I went from 185 to 102. I lost 83 pounds, I think it was.
during that excursion.
Yeah. Then I had boils all over me from not washing and
Yeah.
all over my neck. And we used to eat, we got to be the best thieves in the world there. Train would go by with potatoes or sugar beets or something. We'd knock one off the top of the gondola, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, if we got caught, we got beat up for it, but it was worth it.
What about in the wintertime now? Did you have any heat in those buildings?
We had this one pot-bellied stove that a lot of guys took their beds and took the slats out, and we burnt them, and then we stole coal along the railroad tracks, and then so we had enough heat because we was only in the barracks for maybe 5 or 6 hours. The rest of the time we was out working, you know.
Yeah.
So we, and then they give us an overcoat apiece from Ukraine or some countries that every one of us had a different Polish or something, you know. But we kept our own regular.
Did they give you a blanket?
No, we slept with a coat over us, you know,
Yeah.
our own overcoat. But they were good, heavy overcoats. I mean, they.
Yeah, I had an overcoat made for the women, British woman army.
Was that right?
Yeah. It was, like you say, it was pretty good heavy, but of course it didn't fit, but it was pretty good and heavy. Then we had a blanket, but
I don't think we ever
you could
had
kind of read newspapers through the blankets, so it wasn't too thick.
Yeah, we usually slept in our clothes, so we didn't.
Yeah,
need a
sure. Well,
blanket.
we did too. Yeah,
It was.
there's nothing else to do. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
What about your shoes? Did you have pretty good shoes?
We had our own boots all the time until us three escaped. Then they took our boots away and gave us wooden shoes. But really, they were better. I mean, they were a better conductor. We all froze our feet, but I mean, they were better. We were frozen worse if it hadn't been for them.
I see.
And so we wore them on the tracks, but we still had our boots in the barracks. I mean, we still
But you wore the wooden shoes
out on the tracks.
How were they to get used to? Get used to them pretty fast?
No, I don't think you ever get used to it.
No.
They give you blisters and everything else, you know. So when I was over to Holland the second time, I bought me a pair to take home, and every time I got discouraged, I put them on, go out in the yard, and that does it.
How about gloves? Caps on?
Well, we wrapped rags around our hands.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't give us any gloves. But we still had our jump jackets underneath these big coats. And then our socks, we'd wear one side out and we'd turn it around and take the top part of the sock and use it later on, you know. So, and we took paper lots of times and wrapped around our feet to, you know, because paper is a good conductor of heat.
Did you get any Red Cross parcels over there?
We had one time right after Christmas.
You got one.
And
was that divided amongst several people, or 2, 3, or?
I think about 3 or 4 guys. I'm not really too sure. But that's the only time we ever got Red Cross parcels.
But that, of course, that was pretty good, that one part.
Yeah,
what about mail?
We never did get any mail, but we were allowed to. My mother got 3 letters from me.
Yeah.
So they, in fact, my mother I was killed in action until after January. So
I see.
For 3 or 4 months, they thought I was killed in action.
Yeah.
And then, in fact, some of the guys that come home with me, their parents had already been collected the $10,000, and they had to pay it back. Yeah. So and I had one that really tickled me. We got $1 a day or something for being prisoner of war, and it come to $300 and some odd dollars. I'm not going to say the amount, but anyhow. So when after I got home and everything, why the governments found out that I was with the Russians 11 days, so they made me pay $11 back to them because I was with the Russians, friendly troops.
I see.
I just found that letter not too long ago, and I really had quite a charge. I must have paid it because they didn't come after me.
Well, how long now? When did you sort of sense that the war was, or you had to move, or the war was coming to an end, or something?
About April, we heard from the guard. See, it's strange, but we had guys in there that could speak almost every language.
Yeah,
I see. They speak Polish, and they told what was happening. There were a lot of Polish prisoners around in there, and they were real friendly with us.
Now, you in this camp now, when you were out on this work details, did you have very different nationalities with you?
No, just our guys. But there would be young girls working in the fields and everything next to the tracks and everything, and Polish people that worked for the railroad and you know, this kind of thing.
Well, you were pretty close to Poland then at that time, or?
Yeah. I'd guess maybe 300 or 400 miles. I don't know.
Then, how did you sense that the war was coming to an end, or outside? You heard these rumors then from these people.
Then we start hearing bombardments, you know, from the Russians.
Could you hear the Russian artillery?
Yeah, that's what kind of knew they were getting close.
At night.
Yeah, and at the end there, they start taking all our guards, young guards, to fight, and they give us old men our age.
These old men weren't too enthusiastic.
No, actually, we had one old guard that was so old and crippled up that with these sidecars on railroads, you know, we used to have to hold his rifle, set him up there, and give him his rifle to guard us.
I know towards the end of the war, I remember some of those guys were so bad shape, you know, you had to, I know the guard where I was at had to carry his rifle around the barracks when he counted the men because he was just too decrepit. He was crying like mad. He couldn't take it anymore. I tried to help him out.
We had a guard one night come up, and I guess he couldn't cry amongst his own troops, and he come up there and crying they'd killed his family in Hamburg, you know, and we, you know, we felt sorry for him, but yet, you know, it's hard to feel sorry for somebody who's been fighting and giving you orders, but anyhow, I felt really sorry, and the rest of us did too, that his family, he didn't dare cry in front of his own people, so he come up there and cried to us that the Americans had bombed his family and killed him.
Well, a strange incident along this line happened that he was in Japan, and the war was getting to an end, and by gosh, a cook was killed by the Americans as they flew over there accidentally. And every man in that camp collected all the money he could, and he gave to the cook's wife.
Is that right?
You know, because the cook was a good guy, and they just felt sorry they'd been killed by an American. Well, okay, you got now as the German artillery, I mean the Russian artillery is coming closer, and these guards were changing. I suppose you were almost in charge of the camp rather than Germans.
Yeah. Everybody's kicking off except one guard, and he wanted to go along with us. He was a younger guy, and we each gave him a little piece of our uniform to make him to guard us while we was with the Germans until we got to the Russians, you know. And so he stayed with us, and the whole German army this was the last pocket of the war up in there.
Yeah.
And there was people from every country in the world.
So this guard, this German guard, then could claim he was an American. Is
Right.
That, yeah.
Yeah. Until we got down to it, and then we turned him in to the Americans.
Yeah.
But so then we was amongst the whole German army. Most of them were giving up. They were dropping their rifles and getting rid of their uniforms, and it was the biggest chaos I've ever seen in my life. And the Russians were coming, and they were shooting at everybody. And
how did the Russians come, with tanks or carriers?
The first Russians we seen, we come over this hill, and we come into there was 2 Russians with sidecars, motorcycles and sidecars, and they had a squeeze box and a gun, and they were heading for Rostock, and they asked if where Rostock, and we pointed down the road, and we heard a big boom. I think that's the last I ever seen of them. Then pretty soon here come a whole bunch of these little Mongolian soldiers with horses and wagons.
Oh yeah, Cossacks or what?
Yeah, Cossacks, and they'd run over. A guy'd fall off the tailgate, and they'd run over, and they had no.
They were tough.
And not only that, but they had no respect for life of any kind, you know. And they all drank vodka. And this one guy had a gas can on the back of his, like something like a Jeep, you know. And he told us to take a drink. We wouldn't do it. And here he took a drink first, and he had that thing full of vodka. And that's the first time we'd really had to drink everything, and it just about paralyzed us because it was all so weak and everything.
Well, those Cossacks now, or those Mongolians, did they finally leave, or did you?
Well, no, they started taking all the prisoners, and so
they took the prisoners
for the Germans and you know, all the ones, and they were taking them the other direction,
going east.
Yeah, right. And so then we start going out and getting horses, and that was part of my job from being a boy in South Dakota, and go get horses and bicycles and stuff. And then we had a wagon, and an American woman that got caught over there during the war. She rode back with us on this wagon, and we had an American flag on it. And
now you got this wagon, these horses. You were going west then, were you? Away from the Russians?
We was going towards
American line.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Away from the Russians.
Right. The Russians were heading, but we went cross country because they were going to the big towns like Rostock and stuff. Yeah. And I've heard after when I was over there 3 years ago that the town of Rostock, they'd killed 45,000 people in that town alone. The Russians had, and
well, they were. Yeah, I can see they were.
They had no respect for anything, and and which maybe they were right to do this. I don't know.
It's got a picture there that's.
These are guys from my company. This is in the town of Carrington, and this guy right here's got a bullet hole in his helmet. He died about an hour or so after that picture was taken. But this is in all the national magazines nowadays. This picture is with, and his name is Ferguson. This guy, and I've met him 2 or 3 times now in the last 5 years. Yeah. But then most of these got killed after they took the town of Carrington. They got in a pocket.
Carrington, now that's a town in Germany.
No, that's in France. This
excuse me. Oh yeah,
we're kind of moving back to France.
Yeah, sure, okay.
And this is a real famous picture in all the magazines.
But now, when you did you round up a horse and a wagon and farm and stuff?
We round up a lot of them. I mean, that was my job. I'd go out to the farm and take a guy's horse, and if he was plowing or something, we'd take his horse away.
Like you think they didn't shoot you?
Well, they didn't. The Germans didn't have no guns. They didn't care because if we hadn't taken them, the Russians would take them.
I see. Yeah.
And they would rather give them to us. Same with bicycles. Yeah. We had a lot of them that unhooked their horses and gave us their horses. And, you know, and others
cartons on. Yeah.
Right. And others we just took them if they didn't want to give them to us.
And then you just kept on going.
Yeah, but the one story that's in here that's real funny is we was in this great big mansion when we first met the Russians, and it had 3 floors of stairs, and it was a real big place. But anyhow, there's a Russian prisoner there that he come up to me and he wanted to blow the safe up to the 3rd floor, and so him and I blew the safe, but we blew the wall down first. We finally got into the safe, and in this safe was a tray of rings and jewelry, and then a great big stack of money like this, you know. And so this Russian prisoner of war, he took the jewelry and I took the money, and I've got millions and millions of German. They ain't worth nothing, but I'll say you something. But
the Russian, he took the valuable stuff.
Yeah, and he knew more about it. And the young girls that were burying silverware and stuff outside, we helped them bury silverware and stuff.
out in the yard?
gals that worked there, see,
Yeah.
they was taking everything, the linens. And one American stole 3 fur coats. One was a fox, and one was he thought was an ermine, and the other one was a mink coat.
Yeah.
He got to the States, and he'd traded the other 2 off, and he got to home, and he had the rabbit. It was rabbit instead of ermine. But this place are the Russians. There's one Russian come in there just stoned to the gills, and he'd come up, he had pistols all over him. I was coming down the stairs, and he was coming up, and he looked at me and pointed a pistol at me, and I hollered, "Americans, Americans," and he turned around, seen a mirror, and shot that mirror all to pieces, you know. But he was really out of it, this guy. So,
Like you think he didn't shoot you?
well, he would have if I hadn't hollered what
Yeah.
I did about being American and stuff. You know.
Well, now what happened now? You're in with these here Germans. I mean, with these Russians now, and the Russians. I suppose the Germans are just all fleeing, like you say,
Yeah.
or burning
Right,
stuff, or getting out of there.
Yeah.
What happened then?
Well, the Russians, we did meet up with them. They took over the towns and everything, and
Yeah.
they would come in at nights, and we'd stay 3 or 4 guys in a house, and they'd come in and rape these young girls and stuff during the night, and nothing we could do about it, just sit there and
Yeah.
hear them scream.
How long were you there then?
Well, I think we was with them 11 days.
Yeah. With
but
the Russians now.
Yeah, but I think, and I think we went 200 and some kilometers altogether. But we went in a circle. We went away from the main roads, cross country and everything to avoid the Russians, you know.
I see.
And so then we finally got to where I think it was the English and the Americans, English and Russians right around the river there. Well, in the meantime, before we come into one of these towns, that everybody thinks that there was only a few of these, like Buchenwald and some of them, but there was 142 of these places, and we come into a town where they were burning the Jews, and also they were burning their own people that were handicapped or mentally disturbed. They were burning their own because they wanted a true race.
Yeah.
And there was over 10,000 laying dead and burnt where we were that one day at Wismere is the name of the town. And when I was over there 3 years ago, that very same spot, there's an amusement park, and I just couldn't take that. I thought that was really different.
Did you try and get back to those camps that you were at?
I did get back to it in like 3 years ago.
Could you kind of see that they were still there? Or,
yeah, and the town where we was prisoner, the Russians completely demolished it except for 2 houses. And the only way we could find where we was at is where we used to go get water out. You know, we'd go get a cart at night and fill this cart with water for our use and stuff. And that well was still there, but the whole town was completely gone. A town of maybe 600 or 700 people probably, but there were only 2 houses left, and the Russians just demolished it. You know.
Now, how did you get to the Americans, or how, or the British? Did you get to them, or which?
We got to the British, and then the Russians told us we had to go back, and they would take us to Russia and then send us home that way.
Yeah, through Odessa, I think.
Yeah. And we had a big talk amongst all of us of what to do, and finally we sent 2 guys through the lines. They crossed the river and got over and they ran into 2 British medical doctors, and they told them about it, and they went and got a hold of the Americans, and they come up with 3-ton trucks and come to where the Russians were, and they had a big discussion, and they finally let them through, and then they picked us up. But 2 of the guys went back with the Russians that I know of. There's probably more, and we've never heard from them yet. I mean, they
didn't get back to the States.
No, I've talked to their families, and they had them listed as dead, and I've seen them right to that point, you know. So they went to Russia, and they probably died in some gulag or something.
Well, you never know what happened. You know?
Because that time, you know, Russians, Americans weren't friendly, you know.
You know, Stuart Bakken, he's down at the North Dakota State College there. He was kind of like you in that area, but he went back to Russia, and he went with the Russians, but there was a large group, and they went through Odessa, and then they went through the Black Sea, and finally got to the States.
Well, that's what they told us. We could get through faster. You know, if we didn't, we had to go back to some camp and stay in some camp until they sent for us. But if we went with them, we could go back right
Sure.
now, and it didn't. It smelled like something.
No, I didn't know. Now, what happened then after you got with the
Well,
British here?
We got with the British, and that night they put us in a hotel, in somewheres in
How many were there of you now then?
probably 100 or so.
Were you getting food now and water?
Oh yeah, that was the worst part. We started eating too much, and everybody got really deathly sick. You know,
Sick, yeah.
because we'd been so long without food that decent food that everybody got sick and stuff. And then they put us in hospitals. Those that did get sick, and I was one of them too. That I tried to eat too much.
Now, then what happened to you?
Well, then they sent us by train. I think it was to Camp Lucky Strike. You know. Then I went over to Ireland to see my girlfriend over there, but things didn't turn out too great.
Now, you went to Lucky Strike. I mean,
Right.
Yeah. Now, that is the big deep arc. That's where they loaded all the
Prisoners of
prisoners
war.
on
Yeah,
to
right.
take them back to the States. yeah.
Right, yeah.
How long were you at Lucky Strike?
Probably 2 days ago.
Oh, I
Then
see.
I flew over. I got a chance to fly over to Ireland,
Oh, I see.
Northern Ireland. So
Yeah.
I went over to Northern Ireland, and I was there 5 or 6 days with my girlfriend, and
Then you come back to
back to Lucky Strike. And
yeah. And then you stayed there for a while. Then you finally got on
I got on a ship.
a
coming
ship
home.
to take you
Yeah,
back.
right.
Where'd you go then? To
Okay, we come to Norfolk, Virginia. I think
that's-
where we
yeah.
landed. I don't know about you. Where you?
well, I went up to New York to
Oh, did you? Oh,
to just outside of in, New Brunswick, New Jersey, there and in that area, Camp Kilmer,
yeah.
and then they organized us. They had put us on a big field there, and they put up signs. You know, Minnesota, North Dakota, Texas, and so on. You all gathered around.
We
this
were so
sign.
late that there wasn't that many of us. There was probably only 50 or 60 of us, because most of us were guys that were probably in the hospital.
I see.
And I was in Ireland, and when we come back, we were the last prisoners to get out of there. You know, so we weren't really a big group.
No,
at
I
all.
see.
If
But
we
the
were
ship was full, I suppose.
not really. No,
Oh, was it?
we were lucky if there was over 100 on the ship.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And
Well, what time? You don't remember just what time it was that you got to States?
probably in October, maybe. Or
I see. Okay. Well, I got back in well, about first of July. See.
oh no, I was still.
But now, what happened then after you got back to the States? Where'd you go to?
Well, after Norfolk, they put us on a train. I think there was 40 or 50 of us there, and this lieutenant says, "I want to see every one of you get to the destination in Washington." That'd be at what's the name of that big camp in Washington?
Well, it's Fort Lewis.
Fort Lewis. Okay, so they on the train, while all the guys stopped, every time the train stopped, they just get off and have a few drinks, and they come after the big truck to pick us up in Fort Lewis, and there's 4 of us, and even our captain was missing. He's somewhere in Wyoming. He must have had a drink too many. Because we stopped I don't know how many places on the way back, and
Was this a troop train?
yeah.
One of those where you did you eat in a boxcar, or did you eat on the regular meals on?
I think on regular meals
Yeah.
on regular train. Yeah.
Yeah. But you were. And then how was your health now when you got back?
Real bad. I mean, I had an awful time with everything, and this time, and so then they sent us down to California to,
Rest.
yeah.
How long were you there?
I think we was about a month there. Then I had to go back to Fort Benning, Georgia to get my back jump pay, you know.
Oh yeah.
And,
Yeah, you were pretty rich then when they got that.
well, yeah, I think I had about $2,000 some. Boy, I was,
you were on top of the gravy train then
You
with
really
all that
can't-
money.
yeah. then
What'd
I-
you do then?
Well,
Did
so
you get
that-
discharged? Where'd you
well,
get discharged?
at Fort Benning, Georgia, they it's kind of a funny deal. If we got discharged before we made this jump, we'd get our jump pay. But if we didn't, if our name wasn't called, we had to make that jump to get our back jump pay. Well, I paid another kid $50 to jump for me because I wasn't about to make another jump, and he was just going through jump training. But if he had got killed or something, I'd have really been in trouble, you know. But anyhow, I got my back jump pay, which was about $2,000, I guess, in back pay. And
Then you were discharged.
yeah, and then they sent, I was discharged there, and I went straight home from there
Yeah. To
to
Coeur d'Alene?
Bremerton, Washington. Then.
Bremerton.
I was living
Oh
there.
yeah, I see. How did you end up in Tioga, North Dakota here.
Well, my wife is from Ray, North Dakota.
Oh, yeah.
And her folks lived in Ray, North Dakota. And when we was going together, we got married, and we went home so much, to see her parents. So we figured, well, when I got my apprenticeship over in plastering, we thought I'd start contracting there, and I've been kind of there ever since.
Yeah. Now, you do contracting on big buildings all over the state, don't you, North Dakota?
Yeah.
But you say your son, you had two sons?
Yeah, one's a doctor in California, and he's an emergency room doctor, and the other son runs my company now. He owns a
Where does he live, in Tioga?
Oh, he lives in Minot.
Oh, he lives in Minot. And you do contracting for buildings. What kind of buildings do you build?
Well, all commercial, like big motels, and schools, and apartment houses, big ones, and.
You don't do much individual housing?
No, the only time we ever do that is some friend or something,
yeah.
That.
How's business been?
Really great.
Yeah.
In fact, he's done twice what I did.
Say, before we close, I'd like to, you got a real beautiful picture here of your medals, and I'd like to just take the opportunity to show them and tell us what they are, because...
okay, this furthest one is...
Wait until we get we've got the camera on those? Okay.
Okay, the furthest one is
this one over here.
European theater with 3 battle stars. Then the second one is a Purple Heart, I got from in France. Then the Bronze Star for bravery.
What Bronze Star now? You for bravery? Was that in the jump?
Well, that was in Normandy. Oh. Actually, our whole unit and each man separately got a medal.
I see.
The ones that lived,
Yeah.
So it was. Then my second Purple Heart. Then this is a Prisoner of War medal, and that's the American Theater way over there.
Over here.
And this is the Soldier's Medal. I think everybody got these.
Yeah.
And this is Silver Star. It's probably the 3rd highest. There's the Distinguished Service Cross and the Congressional Medal of Honor. And then the 3rd one down is the Bronze Star. Then this is the Good Conduct. I don't know why I ever got that one. Then this American Theater. And this medal here I really appreciate. The Queen of Holland gave me that, the Queen Beatrice.
Oh, that round one.
When I was over the second time, she gave us. Then there's the ex-prisoner of war signed, and this is unit citation.
Unit citation.
Yeah, right.
Say, what about the top now? You got
that's the combat infantry badges, then our wings, and then there's the lapels we wore on the shoulder. Then the French lot of gear, is that the way it's pronounced?
Yeah.
Then the Holland Lehman or Holland or something like that. And,
so now that's pretty nice. Now you get disability from the veterans for being injured in your disability.
I get 20% for shrapnel in my lungs, and I've gotten a 20% since that for trauma and other things.
Now, how has the federal government treated you since you left the service?
Well, they kind of left me alone.
Yeah,
I've left them alone.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, they've like my teeth and my eyes and things like that. They've been real good about.
Yeah. Giving you glasses and so on.
Right.
Yeah. And the doctoring you have done, you've done that at Fargo, I suppose,
right.
at VA.
Right.
Have you had any major operations done by the VA? Or?
No, I never have.
No, I see.
I never.
Yeah, Pat Martin, now he was here last week. He had open heart surgery.
Is that right?
A couple things, yeah.
No, I've been real good. I lay it on being a paratrooper because we had the best training, and in my younger years we was top physical condition, and I think this carried. Then working hard as a construction, I think this.
Did you work out of Tioga most of the time?
My office is in Tioga and Williston.
Yeah, I see.
And then
you must have driven those roads in there quite a few times.
Especially to Minot and Bismarck. And well, we go into Montana too. About.
My son is a friend of yours, as you know.
Right.
He's attorney there at Minot. I don't know whether he's against you or for you.
No, him and I are buddies.
I see.
There's asbestos in the schools and stuff. Why I had old records that I never did away with.
Yeah.
And so he found these, and I could tell what company we used, and so they paid the schools, and like at Tioga, I think got $750,000 there, and some of the others got $1 million or.
I know they've got.
They get some pretty good money for.
Yeah.
this asbestos.
Yeah.
What's funny, like Tioga, probably my bill when I done it was like 30 or 40,000, and they're getting 75,000 or something for taking it off.
Yeah. How are your kids' health then, and your wife?
Well, both of my sons are doing real. My oldest son is a doctor in California, and he's got 3 vineyards at Napa.
Oh.
So he's doing real well, and he's a wine man. And
Yeah.
and my youngest son his wife is a nurse, and that's why they moved to Minot, because she got ahead of the nursing at Minot.
Oh, I
there.
see. Yeah.
And so then he moved
Yeah.
himself there. But the sad part, we got our office in Williston, warehouse in Tioga, and he lives in Minot. Communication isn't the greatest.
No. Where's your wife from? What is her town?
My wife's from Ray, North Dakota. She's
Ray, yeah.
the next town over.
Yeah.
And her parents are all gone.
Yeah.
In fact, she's the last living one of that
Family.
generation.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's here today, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, we just got back from Sweden 3
Yeah.
days ago, and
Yeah, you've
she
been pretty much on the go here the last
yeah.
month or two here.
Then we was down in Kentucky to meet with the guys at Prisoner of War, and at the race there, they dedicated to the Prisoner of War of the number 7th race to the horse that won it and the jockey, and they had a big blanket there, 311I POWs, and
I see.
and then they presented this blanket, and now they're sending me this blanket. So
Oh, yeah.
all I need now is a horse to put it on.
Yeah. How do you like Andersonville?
Oh, that has got to be the greatest place for prisoners of war.
Better tell what Anderson.
Well, Andersonville is
Where is it located? Let me put a S
Okay,
to that
it's
first.
60 miles south of Atlanta, Georgia.
Straight south?
South, yeah.
Can't be too far from Columbus. I mean, from
America.
Fort Benning.
No, it isn't. It's only about 30 miles.
Yeah.
It's, in other words, it's straight down, and it's where all the prisoners of war, the Union soldiers were prisoners of war.
Yeah.
And there was 45,000 of them, and I think 16,000 died there within a year. So it was really a total disaster.
Now that's a public place. You can go
Right.
there. And,
Everybody, they're spending $12 million now to redo the whole thing like it was.
And it's being dedicated to the. Say, by the way, there was a stamp here, you know, about last year.
Right, yeah. Not a stamp, but that Communion dollar.
Yeah, there was a commemorative dollar and the
that's
stamp.
where they got most of the money of this $12 million.
There was a stamp too, MIA-POW.
Yeah.
By the way, yesterday I was at the post office and I bought. They have a sheet of stamp. I mean, I don't know how many, 25 or so,
Yeah.
commemorating the Air Force, 50 years of
Is
Air
that
Force,
right?
50 years
Oh,
of
they
different
did.
airplanes. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I want to thank you a lot, Dan,
Sure.
for coming here, and I know that you and your children and family, when wife and son will enjoy this tape that they're making, and we're going to send it. School here is going to send a tape with you home now, so you can have something to show, and I'll make you a couple extra tapes here and send to you. So we appreciate you coming, and I realize it's quite a extensive trip you're making to come here, but I'm sure it's well worthwhile for you and your family. So
I would like to say one thing. This book here I've dedicated to the University of North Dakota. They've got one on record here somewhere, and now this book is going to be made into a movie. We don't. It'll be probably 2 years now before the movie comes out, but
that's on the work area where you was in,
right.
yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Dan, and
Yeah.
you take good care of yourself and
Thank you. And
have
thanks for everything,
a
Elmer.
have a good trip back. And I'll contact some of your buddies now,
Okay.
and you can mention what if you were here and what happened, and they'll perhaps be not as hesitant to come. Sometimes people are a little afraid to do something. A little leery, but you can tell them that we're friendly here, and the staff is friendly, and they treat you real
I
nice.
sure appreciate this.
Yeah. So thanks an
Thank
awful
you
lot.
very much.